On March 26, 2005, Doctor Who returned to our screens for the 21st century after a 16-year absence. Russell T Davies was now the head writer of the show, and had made an interesting casting choice as Christopher Eccleston as the new Ninth Doctor, with Billie Piper alongside as the companion, Rose Tyler. In this video, I'll be ranking every single Christopher Eccleston episode from worst to best. Bear in mind, I actually do like all of the episodes that featured the Ninth Doctor, so this list was pretty hard to construct. So without any further ado, let's begin. At number 10, we have Boomtown. Personally, I think this is probably the weakest story from Series 1. It has some fun moments, but in comparison to some of the other episodes in the series, it's just not that good. We see the return of a Slitheen, well, a singular Slitheen, in the form of Margaret Blaine, who, for some reason, has now become the Mayor of Cardiff. We're not sure how exactly this happened, as it was never previously explained in the series, but I guess we just have to accept that. There are some good scenes where Margaret tells the Doctor that if she sends her back home she'll be executed, and the scene where the Doctor and Rose and Jack try to chase down Margaret. But one of the main problems I have with this episode is Rose. The reason being is that for this one particular scene, I absolutely really hate her character because of the way she treats Mickey in the episode, and that makes her a fine example of a world-class bitch. The story itself is definitely one of the weakest episodes of the modern era, but it's still watchable nonetheless if you can get past the arrogance of Rose Tyler. Because, honestly, Boomtown is probably one of the most forgettable stories of Series 1, and probably the modern era in general. At number 9, we have The Long Game. In this episode, we see the Doctor, Rose, and some guy arrive on Space Station Satellite 5, and it is the year 200,000. We are told that it is the fourth great and bountiful human empire, and by this point Satellite 5 has been installing fear into the human race. While the premise itself is quite interesting, it really feels like this episode could have done with the second part because of the episode's sheer size and scale. I quite liked how the episode was basically a test for Adam's character, to see whether or not if he is worthy of travelling with the Doctor, and of course he fails the test. The problem with Adam is that he is such a dull character with barely any characteristics, and we barely get enough time to make us care for him, and that makes him such a forgettable companion. Two of the supporting characters, Kathika and Suki, barely get anything to do, and the same could be said for Rose. My favourite part of the story has to be the editor, as played by Simon Pegg, who gives an absolutely brilliant performance, and you can really tell he's having an absolute blast playing the character. I also really like the concepts of the Jaguaress, as I think it's a really cool looking creature, and it's actually quite horrifying. Overall, it's a pretty average episode that suffers from a lot of exposition, and could have done with the second part to fleshing out the plot, just because of the fact that the sheer size and scale of the episode is so massive. At number 8, we have The End of the World. This is an episode of which I barely get here talked about, and it's an episode that I love more and more every time I watch it. Of course, it isn't a brilliant story by any means, but I just love the costumes of some of the aliens on board the satellite because I think they just look brilliant and they're really well detailed. We're also introduced to the wonderful creation of the face of Bo, as well as a really bar and also quite a hilarious villain in the form of Cassandra, aka The Last Human, played to perfection by Zoe Wanamaker, who we later see return in New Earth. What I love most about the story are some of its emotional scenes, with the Ninth Doctor and Rose, where he shows her the final moments of the Earth before it is destroyed, or blown up, or however you describe it. Another emotional moment for me is where we see Jabe sacrifice herself so that the Doctor can save the space station and the people on board. The story actually features one of my favourite Ninth Doctor moments, and that is the scene where the Doctor successfully steps through the turbine propellers, with the Doctor's theme playing in the background. This scene will always give me goosebumps every time I watch it, and it never fails to make me smile. At number 7, we have Rose. This marks a brand new era for Doctor Who, as it saw the programme's glorious return, and it's the first story to feature Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor. This is a great reintroduction for the show, and is for the character of the Doctor, as well as introducing the Time War, an idea that added a whole new chapter to the show's history. The story sees an interesting return of the Autons, who are one of my favourite monsters, and the Nesting Consciousness. It's pretty much a soft reboot of the Third Doctor story, Spearhead from Space, but with plenty of 21st century elements added in as well, as a whole new look for the programme. It's not the best story in the world, but it's a fun, solid piece of television that's easy viewing and perfect for anyone who wants to get into Doctor Who. I also really enjoyed the Target novelisation of the story as well, as it really was a trip down memory lane. My favourite scene in the entire episode is where the Doctor tells Rose about the Earth revolving and how they're clinging to this tiny little world. It's a truly excellent writing from Russell T Davies. At number 6 we have The Unquiet Dead. This is the first modern Doctor Who historical, and in the episode we see the Doctor and Rose travel back in time to Cardiff, 1869, where they meet legendary writer Charles Dickens, played by Simon Callow. The idea of the rift is introduced, and we later find out that Mr. Snee's servant girl Gwyneth has a strong connection with an alien being known as the Gelth, whose homeworld was destroyed during the Time War. I really like the concept and the design of the Gelth, as well as the creature's interaction with Gwyneth, played brilliantly by Eve Miles, who would later on appear in the spin-off Torchwood as Gwen Cooper. Personally, I think this is Mark Gatiss' best script for the programme, as I really like all the characters and plot lines throughout the story. It does get quite emotional towards the end, as we see Gwyneth sacrifice herself to save the Doctor, Rose and Charles Dickens. One aspect of the story I really like is the direction from Euros Lyn. As I've said, it's probably Gatiss' best script, and probably one of the best modern era historicals. At number 5 we have the two-parter Aliens of London and World War III. This may come as a surprise to some of you, but this two-parter is actually one of my favourites on modern Doctor Who. For some reason, I just really like this story. I can't quite explain it, but I'll just tell you some of the reasons why I love it so much. The first reason is the Slitheen. While there are quite a few people who don't like the Farzing aliens, I personally think they're really unique and very different from anything that we've seen before. Of course, on paper, the concept of the Slitheen is really quite silly and a bit daft, but I think in terms of its execution, Russell T Davies and the production team pulled it off really well. I also really love the cliffhanger for Aliens of London, as I think that the ending shot of the Slitheen laughing whilst all the humans and the Doctor surrounding it are being electrocuted to death is Doctor Who at its finest. Despite the demise of the Slitheen being quite epic when they all get blown up inside 10 Downing Street, the scene where the camera looks down on the Slitheen never fails to make me laugh, as I always found that scene to be somewhat hilarious. I sort of get why people don't like the Slitheen as monsters, but personally, I have quite a soft spot for them, and I also just really like this two-parter in general. At number 4 we have Father's Day. This is probably one of the most emotional Doctor Who stories of all time. This story sees the Doctor and Rose travel back in time during the 1980s, where Rose meets her father Pete not long before he dies from a hit-and-run driver. What I quite like about this story is that because Rose made the stupid mistake of saving her dad, which meant that she was interfering with time, and because of this, we get to see the consequences of her actions, which lead to the creatures known as the Reapers invading the Earth and eating everyone around them simply because of one man's existence. As for the Reapers themselves, I think they're a really cool concept, and the design is also quite interesting, despite them being completely CGI. It's a shame they haven't made a return to the television series since the episode. The final scenes between Rose and Pete are very emotional, with the acting from both cast members being very well performed, as well as Murray Gold's score adding even more emotion to these touching scenes. I can see why some might consider this to be an overrated story, but personally I think it's one of New Who's best, and it also serves as a great character piece for Rose, regardless of whether or not you liked her as a companion. At number 3 we have Dalek. Unfortunately, this is the only Robert Sherman script that was written for the television series, and it's regarded as being one of the best Dalek stories of all time, and it's probably the best Dalek story for the revived era of the show. One of the reasons that the story was created in the first place was because Russell T Davies really loved a certain Big Finish audio drama called Jubilee, which featured the Sixth Doctor, and because of this was soon the inspiration for Dalek. What makes the story so brilliant is the Dalek itself, and here we see the potential damage that can be done with just one Dalek in the room, let alone a whole army of Daleks. My favourite scene in the whole story has got to be where the Doctor confronts the chained Dalek, and they both reflect on their own races and the Time War. What makes this scene stand out is Christopher Eccleston's acting, and his interaction with the Dalek. It's definitely one of the most memorable scenes of the show's history, and it's arguably one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time, honouring the Doctor's most oldest and deadliest enemy in a fantastic way. I just wish Robert Sherman would come back to write one more episode for the series. At number 2 we have Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. In my personal opinion, this is the best finale for the modern era of Doctor Who, as it has one of the best endings to any series. In the story we learn more about the Bad Wolf plotline and what that could mean, and we also see the brilliant return of the Daleks, as well as the return of the Emperor Dalek, who was last seen way back in 1967 with Patrick Troughton as the Doctor in the story called Evil of the Daleks. In this story, we see the Doctor, Rose and Captain Jack wake up from amnesia as they find themselves taking part in some live TV, reality and game shows like Big Brother and The Weakest Link. They soon realise that the losers of this show get disintegrated and are then taken to the Daleks. One of the many great scenes of this story is where the Doctor vows to rescue Rose from the Daleks and destroy them forever. This story also sees the regeneration of the Ninth Doctor, and personally this is my favourite regeneration of all time. I just love the dialogue between Rose and the Doctor, the special effects used for the regeneration blast, as well as the emotional score from Murray Gold in the background. Despite Eccleston only doing 1 year as the Doctor, the regeneration itself was a huge deal, and I still shed a few tears every time I watch it. At number 1, we have The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. This is Stephen Moffat's first entry into the television series, and is arguably one of the scariest Doctor Who stories of all time. It sees the Doctor Rose land in London 1941 during the height of the Blitz, as they chase down a metal cylinder marked as dangerous through the time vortex. What I love most about the story is the World War II setting, as the episodes themselves look atmospheric, and the lighting and set design really do help to bring this part of history to life on screen. What makes the story so scary is the idea and design of the gas mask zombies. This story also introduces the character of Captain Jack, who would later on to have a huge impact on the show, as he was having his own spin-off series called Torchwood. This has another one of my favourite Ninth Doctor moments, and that moment is where we see the Doctor celebrating and saying, "Everybody lives," because of the fact that the characters Nancy and her son Jamie have reunited, and everyone who is affected by the touch of the empty child has been restored. This is definitely one of Stephen Moffat's best scripts of all time, and one that will always be remembered. So there we have it. That is my ranking of every Ninth Doctor story from worst to best. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and let me know your ranking of the Ninth Doctor's era in the comments below. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.